The sun had barely risen over Eagle Peak when Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel, glancing at the woman sitting beside him. Laura looked as serene as she always did, her eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses, her hair perfectly arranged even after a long drive. This mountain town had once been their secret place, the very spot where two broke university students fell helplessly in love. Back then, they had nothing but shared dreams, laughter, and endless talks under the starry sky. Now, they were coming back as husband and wife, older, wealthier, but somehow farther apart. Laura had suggested the trip. "Maybe a little nostalgia will do us good," she'd said, her tone soft but distant. Mark had agreed instantly, hoping that this short getaway might patch the cracks that had quietly spread through their marriage. He remembered their wedding vows, through every storm, every silence, every shadow. Somewhere along the way, silence had won. When they arrived at the cozy lodge by the lake, Laura went to check in while Mark unloaded their luggage. He noticed how she no longer smiled the way she used to, how her laughter had become polite and practiced. Still, he tried to stay optimistic. That evening, he promised himself he would make her laugh again, maybe take her back to that old cafe where they'd first confessed their love. Later that afternoon, while Laura scrolled through her phone, Mark offered to grab them some drinks from the nearby vending machine. He walked down the hallway, letting the cool breeze calm his racing thoughts. But when he returned, his phone vibrated, a notification popped up from Laura's screen left on the nightstand. It was a message from Dylan, her new intern. "Thanks again for the Jordans, Laura. You didn't have to, they fit perfectly. You're the best." Mark froze. Jordans? The same model he'd wanted for months but never bought for himself? A dull ache spread in his chest as he stared at the message. The shoes, the tone, the familiarity, it all felt wrong. For the first time during their trip to rekindle love, Mark realized something had already gone missing between them, something far more precious than time. It was trust. Mark's hands trembled as he held Laura's phone. He shouldn't be looking, he knew that. But the message from Dylan replayed in his mind like a taunt he couldn't silence. When the screen lit up again, curiosity overpowered reason. He unlocked the phone, the passcode hadn't changed, dozens of messages filled the screen. At first, they seemed harmless, quick check-ins about work, updates on meetings, inside jokes. But as Mark scrolled, the tone shifted. Dylan sent memes late at night. Laura replied with laughing emojis, sometimes followed by hearts. They shared pictures of coffee cups, sunsets, even matching wristbands, the same kind Laura had been wearing recently, claiming it was just a company gift. Mark felt the air thicken around him. He scrolled further. "You looked amazing today during the presentation. Everyone was staring, but I couldn't take my eyes off you." "Stop it," Laura replied, followed by a smiley face. "I mean it. You make Mondays worth it." His heart pounded painfully in his chest. These weren't the kind of messages a married woman should exchange with her intern. The casual intimacy, the effortless connection, it was everything Mark and Laura had lost. He looked around the room. Laura was standing by the window, phone in hand, pretending to take photos of the view. Her face glowed softly under the golden afternoon light. For a second, he almost saw the woman he once adored. But that image shattered quickly when he noticed she was typing again, smiling faintly at the screen. Mark's throat tightened. Suddenly, so many things made sense: the way she pulled away when he tried to hold her, her endless overtime, her distracted smiles during dinner. The warmth between them had faded not because of work or exhaustion, but because her heart had found excitement elsewhere. He set the phone down quietly, his pulse still racing. In that moment, he wasn't angry, not yet. Just hollow. The realization hit him like cold water. The woman he'd built his life around was no longer reaching for him. That night, Laura fell asleep facing the wall, her back to him. Mark lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words "you looked amazing today" echoing in his mind. For the first time in years, he wondered if their marriage was already over, and he was the only one who hadn't noticed. The morning after that night of uneasy silence, Mark stared at his reflection in the mirror, unshaven, tired, and heavier than he remembered. He traced the faint lines near his eyes and wondered when exactly they had appeared. Maybe this was what Laura saw now, a man past his prime, predictable and dull. The thought cut deep. So he made a decision. He joined a gym, started waking up before sunrise, and cut out all the fast food he used to love. Every day, he pushed himself harder, running until his legs ached, lifting until his arms trembled. Each drop of sweat carried the silent hope that maybe, just maybe, Laura would notice. At first, he told himself it was working. He lost weight, bought new clothes, even changed his hairstyle. He rehearsed compliments in his head, planned romantic dinners, and tried to bring laughter back into their evenings. But whenever he showed up, Laura barely looked up from her phone. One night, he stood in the doorway of her study, holding 2 glasses of wine. "You've been working too hard," he said softly. "Let's take a break. Just you and me." Laura didn't even glance up. "I can't tonight, Mark. I've got a deadline," she said, her tone clipped. Then, after a pause, she added without looking at him, "And you should really stop trying so hard." "It's not you." The words stung more than he expected. "Not me?" he repeated, forcing a smile. She sighed, finally meeting his eyes. "You don't need to pretend. You're not 20 anymore." Mark stood frozen, the smile fading from his lips. He placed the glasses down quietly and left the room. That night, he moved into the guest bedroom, at first telling himself it was temporary. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. 6 months later, the silence between them had become routine. They passed each other in the hallway like polite strangers. No fights, no laughter, just 2 people living parallel lives under the same roof. Mark still went to the gym every morning, though he no longer hoped she'd notice. The man in the mirror looked stronger now, but emptier. Every time he returned home to the cold, quiet house, he realized the truth he didn't want to face: it takes 2 people to rebuild a bridge, and Laura had stopped walking toward him long ago. The quiet tension in the house was broken one Sunday morning when Frank, Laura's father, arrived unannounced. His booming voice filled the living room as he handed Mark a firm handshake. "You've lost weight," Frank said approvingly. "Good. Maybe that means my daughter's cooking has improved." Mark forced a polite smile, while Laura appeared from the hallway, her expression tightening the moment she saw her father. "Dad, you should have called," she said, trying to sound casual. Frank waved her off. "I don't need an invitation to visit my own daughter. Besides, it's been years since you 2 got married, and I'm still waiting for some good news." He gave them both a knowing grin. "You're not getting any younger, you know. It's time to give me a grandchild." The air went still. Mark glanced at Laura, waiting for her to respond, but she kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Frank frowned. "What's wrong? Don't tell me you 2 are still waiting for the perfect time." "There's no such thing." Mark hesitated, then exhaled heavily. He was tired of pretending. "Frank," he said carefully, "we haven't exactly been sharing a room for a while now." The older man blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "What do you mean, not sharing a room?" Laura shot Mark a furious look, but he continued, his voice steady. "It's been months. Things between us haven't been good." Frank turned toward his daughter, his tone rising. "Laura, what on earth is going on? You've been married for years, and now you're living like roommates? Have you lost your mind?" Laura's eyes flashed with irritation. Dad, this is between me and Mark. You don't understand, I understand perfectly. Frank interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. This man works hard, provides for you, and you can't even share a bed with him? What happened to your vows? Mark sat quietly, a knot forming in his chest. He didn't want the scene, but part of him was relieved someone finally said it aloud. Laura crossed her arms, defiant. I'm not ready to have a child. Not now. Frank stared at her, disbelief clouding his face. Not ready? Or not interested anymore? Laura didn't answer. The silence that followed said everything. As Frank stormed out, muttering about modern marriages and broken priorities, Mark stood in the hallway, staring at his wife's retreating back. For the first time, he realized she wasn't just distant. She was gone in every way that mattered. That night, long after Frank had left and the house had fallen into uneasy silence, Mark sat alone in the dim glow of his bedside lamp. His thoughts ran in circles: anger, confusion, disbelief. He had hoped Laura might finally face the truth, but instead, she had vanished into her study, leaving him with nothing but questions and the sound of his own heartbeat. Then, close to midnight, a soft knock came at his door. Mark. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. He opened the door to find Laura standing there in her silk nightgown, the faint scent of lavender following her. She looked fragile, or maybe just guilty. Can I come in? She asked. Mark stepped aside silently. She sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her fingers together. I know things haven't been right between us, she began. But I don't want you to think I've stopped caring. I still love you, Mark. I'm just overwhelmed. Work, pressure, the company, it's too much sometimes. He studied her face, the carefully measured tone, the rehearsed sorrow. It almost fooled him, but not quite. You're not overwhelmed, he said quietly. You're disconnected. There's a difference. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've already found what you were missing, somewhere else. His voice trembled, but he didn't look away. You think I don't notice? The smiles you used to save for me now belong to Dylan. Laura's expression hardened. Dylan is just a friend. Someone I can talk to without being judged or ignored. Mark let out a bitter laugh. A friend who sends you heart emojis at midnight? Who wears matching bracelets with you? That's not friendship, Laura, that's an affair you're too cowardly to name. Her face flushed with anger. You don't understand. He listens, Mark. He sees me. You stopped doing that years ago. All you care about is your work, your routines, because I was trying to build a life for us, he snapped. While you were out there chasing attention from a boy who doesn't even know what commitment means. Tears welled in her eyes, but Mark didn't move. The silence between them stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, she whispered, maybe we both stopped seeing each other a long time ago. He nodded slowly. Maybe. But only one of us went looking for someone else to fill the void. That night, Laura left his room without another word. The sound of her footsteps fading down the hall felt like the final echo of a love that had already died. The air at Eagle Peak was crisp that evening, but inside the cabin, tension thickened like a storm about to break. Mark sat on the couch, staring at Laura's phone lying face up on the table. Notifications from Dylan kept lighting up the screen, one after another, as if mocking him. Each new message was a reminder of everything that had crumbled between them. Laura was in the shower, humming softly, oblivious to the chaos waiting outside that bathroom door. Mark's chest burned with anger and disbelief. The words Dylan had sent, the tone, the casual intimacy, all of it spun inside his head until rage took control of his fingers. He opened their chat and typed, "Don't worry, Dylan. Once I'm divorced, you'll have an entire room to store your Jordans. Then he hit send. A surge of adrenaline ran through him. It felt cruel, maybe childish, but it was honest, the first raw emotion he'd allowed himself in months. Moments later, Laura stepped out, her hair still damp, wearing his old sweatshirt like she always did on their vacations. But when she saw her phone, her smile vanished. "Mark, what did you do?" Her voice trembled as she snatched the phone from his hands, eyes wide with panic. "You had no right to know what's been happening under my own roof," he interrupted sharply. "No right to ask why my wife is sending shoes and hearts to her intern?" Before she could respond, the phone buzzed again. Dylan was calling. Mark stared at it, jaw tight. "Go on, answer him," he said coldly. But when she hesitated, he pressed the green button himself. A young man's voice came through, nervous and breathless. "Laura? What's going on?" "I didn't mean for him to find out." Mark's silence made Dylan continue, desperate. "You told me he wouldn't care. You said he'd given up on you, that he wasn't even," Dylan paused, lowering his tone. "That he wasn't man enough for you anymore." Laura gasped, color draining from her face. "Dylan, stop," but the words were out, hanging in the air like shards of glass. Mark's hands clenched. His voice was low, steady, far more dangerous than if he'd shouted. "So that's what you told him?" Laura's eyes filled with tears. "It's not like that. I was angry, confused, he misunderstood." "Don't," Mark cut her off, his tone flat. "You can't misunderstand something you chose to say." In one swift motion, Laura blocked Dylan's number and tossed the phone aside, trembling. "It's over," she whispered. "He's nothing to me." But for Mark, the damage was irreversible. The moment Dylan's voice faded from the line, something inside him went silent, not from anger, but from finality. Their marriage, fragile and fractured for so long, finally collapsed into silence, the kind that comes only after everything worth saying has already been destroyed. The drive back from Eagle Peak was long and silent. Laura sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She spoke softly a few times, asking if he was hungry, offering him water, but Mark barely replied. The sound of the tires against the asphalt was the only thing filling the distance between them. After what happened, something in Mark had shut down completely. No more questions. No more pleading. Just a cold, aching clarity. He was done. When they finally returned home, Laura seemed to sense it too. Over the next few days, she tried to act normal, making breakfast, talking about work, even suggesting they watch a movie together. But Mark's responses were short and hollow. He no longer looked at her with anger or affection, just indifference. That frightened her more than any argument could. Then, one afternoon, a call came from the hospital. Laura's father, Frank, had been admitted after a mild heart attack. They rushed over immediately, and that was when Mark saw him. He was standing in the hospital hallway, dressed in a neat button-down shirt, holding a cup of coffee like he belonged there. Laura froze when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" Mark demanded, his voice low and sharp. Dylan smiled faintly. "Mr. Thompson, relax. I just came to check on Mr. Frank. Laura mentioned he wasn't well, and I wanted to help." Frank, weak but awake in his hospital bed, looked from one man to the other, sensing the tension. "You two know each other?" he asked, confused. Dylan's lips curled slightly. "We've worked together," he said, then added pointedly, "though I suppose not everyone in this family is as hardworking as Laura." Mark's fists clenched. "Watch your mouth." But Dylan didn't back down. He took a slow sip of coffee, eyes glinting. "It's a shame," he said casually. "A woman like Laura deserves someone who can really keep up, in every way." The implication was clear, venomous. Frank frowned, uncertain, and Laura's face went pale. Mark's voice dropped, trembling with restrained fury. You think you know what a man is, Dylan? You wouldn't last a day living the life I've carried for years. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The sterile hospital air felt suffocating. Then Mark turned to Laura, his tone calm but final. You brought him into our lives. You let him humiliate me in front of your father. This is the end, Laura. I'll have the papers ready tomorrow. He walked out before she could reply, leaving behind the faint echo of footsteps, and the wreckage of everything they once called love. The hospital corridor was filled with an icy silence after the doctor handed over the results. Frank's face turned pale, while Laura's fingers trembled as she held the report. Mark stood rigidly, his jaw clenched, eyes dark with restrained fury. Temporary weakness, the doctor had said, caused by exhaustion and stress. But that one word, weakness, was all Dylan needed to twist the knife. So that's it? Dylan sneered, leaning against the wall with a smirk. Guess now we all know why Laura's been so frustrated lately. Laura's eyes widened in panic. Dylan, stop, but it was too late. The words had already burned through the air. Mark turned sharply, his eyes blazing with humiliation and rage. Say that again, he demanded. Dylan crossed his arms, grinning. You heard me. Maybe you should focus less on business and more on being a real husband. Frank's expression hardened, torn between disbelief and shame. The tension in the room snapped. Mark lunged forward, grabbing Dylan by the collar, his voice shaking with fury. You think I don't know what's been going on? I saw your messages. The late-night calls. The way she smiles when your name shows up. Mark, please, Laura cried, but her words were drowned by the chaos. Enough. Mark roared, releasing Dylan and stepping back. His chest rose and fell heavily as he turned toward Laura. I've been patient. I've ignored every whisper, every red flag. But this is the end. The hospital lights flickered above them, cold and unforgiving. People had stopped to watch, murmuring under their breath. Frank's voice trembled as he tried to restore order, but Mark didn't care anymore. He ripped off his wedding ring and threw it on the floor, the metallic clink echoing through the corridor. You wanted freedom, Laura? You have it. From this moment, we're done. Laura stood frozen, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dylan smirked faintly, but even he didn't expect the raw finality in Mark's tone. Mark turned his back on them all, his steps echoing down the sterile hallway. For the first time, he didn't look back. The man who once built his world around love now walked away from it, broken, humiliated, but finally free. The divorce papers were signed in less than an hour, clean, efficient, emotionless. Laura got the house, the car, and most of the furniture. Mark didn't fight for any of it. He only took his books, his guitars, and the savings he'd earned himself. It was all he needed to start over. He moved into his late parents' old studio on the edge of town, a small, quiet space with cracked wooden floors and sunlight spilling through dusty windows. It wasn't luxury, but it was peaceful. For the first time in years, he could breathe without walking on broken glass. Khloe was the first to visit. She brought coffee, a stack of design drafts, and that soft, knowing smile she always had. You look tired, she said gently, handing him the cup. Divorce does that, Mark replied, half smiling. They worked side by side on a new architecture project, long nights filled with silence, music, and the quiet comfort of companionship. Khloe never pried into his past, never asked about Laura or Dylan. Instead, she listened when he spoke and stayed when he fell silent. Over time, laughter began to return to the studio. They shared jokes over midnight pizza, argued about color palettes, and planned small weekend trips to forgotten towns. One evening, as they stood on the balcony watching the sunset, Mark finally felt a strange calm settle inside him. The ache was still there, but softer, almost bearable. Khloe looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "You're getting better, you know," she said quietly. Mark nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah," he murmured. "Maybe this time I'll build something that lasts." The completion of the architecture project felt like a quiet victory for Mark, a symbol that he had finally rebuilt not just his career, but a part of himself. To celebrate, he invited Khloe and his old college friend, Adrian, out for dinner at a cozy rooftop restaurant overlooking the city lights. Khloe arrived last, and when she stepped out of the elevator, both men fell silent. She wore a soft ivory dress that framed her figure elegantly, her hair tied loosely, her smile glowing under the golden light. Gone was the casual girl in oversized sweaters and messy buns. Tonight, she looked confident, radiant, and breathtakingly beautiful. Mark stood up instinctively. "Wow, you clean up nice," he said, half joking, but his voice came out softer than he expected. Khloe blushed, taking the seat beside him. The dinner was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and warm conversation. For the first time in years, Mark genuinely enjoyed himself. There was no tension, no forced smiles, just easy, effortless joy. Adrian, ever observant, leaned toward Mark halfway through the night and whispered, "You do realize she's completely into you, right?" Mark froze for a second, glancing at Khloe as she chatted with the waiter, her laughter ringing softly. "Khloe? No, she's just kind." Adrian shook his head. "Come on, man. I've seen the way she looks at you. That's not kindness. That's love she's been holding back for a long time." Mark fell silent, the words echoing in his chest. As the evening went on, he found himself watching Khloe more closely, the way she leaned in to listen, how her eyes softened when he smiled, how she always made space for his silence without trying to fill it. When the night ended, Mark walked her to her car. The city air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. She turned to him, her voice gentle. "You seem lighter tonight." "Maybe it's the company," he replied, smiling. For a long moment, they just stood there, two souls quietly rediscovering what it meant to feel again. And for the first time since his marriage ended, Mark felt something new stirring inside him. Hope. Just as Mark and Khloe were leaving the restaurant, laughter and the sharp click of heels echoed behind them. Mark turned, and froze. Laura stood there, perfectly dressed as always, her hand resting casually on Dylan's arm. The sight hit him like a punch to the gut. "Well, if it isn't my ex-husband," Laura said with a mocking smile. "You seem happier than expected. Guess rebound projects work fast these days." Dylan smirked, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Didn't think you'd move on so soon, old man. But hey, she's cute. A little young for you, though." Mark's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Khloe stepped forward and took his hand, firmly, confidently. "We were just leaving," she said coolly. Laura's eyes flicked to their joined hands, and for a brief second, her smugness faltered. "So it's true," she said, her voice sharpening. "You replaced me with your assistant. How romantic." Mark said nothing. His silence was calm, deliberate. But Khloe wasn't going to let Laura's words hang in the air. She turned, eyes blazing. "You don't get to talk about him that way," Khloe said, her tone fierce yet steady. "You threw away someone who loved you more than himself. You humiliated him, doubted him, and made him believe he wasn't enough. He deserved better than your cruelty." Laura's expression hardened, her lips twitching with disbelief. "Excuse me?" Khloe stepped closer, her voice low but powerful. "You don't deserve his name, his love, or even a single piece of his peace. So stop pretending like you have the right to judge who he becomes after you. The restaurant went silent for a moment. Even Dylan looked uncomfortable, shifting beside Laura. Mark felt something inside him shift, relief, admiration, and maybe something deeper. He looked at Khloe, his chest tight with unspoken gratitude. Laura finally scoffed, masking her embarrassment with a brittle laugh. "Come on, Dylan. Let's not waste time here." As they walked away, Mark exhaled slowly. Khloe squeezed his hand. "Don't let them pull you back into their mess," she whispered. He smiled faintly, eyes soft on her. "I won't. Not this time." The night air was crisp as Mark stood at the edge of the quiet street, the soft hum of distant traffic fading into the background. Laura faced him, eyes searching, perhaps for a flicker of the man she once knew, but all she found was calm resolve. "Mark," she began, voice trembling slightly. He raised a hand, gentle yet firm, stopping her mid-sentence. "Laura, I don't need excuses. I don't need apologies. I've learned that some things can't be repaired with words or half-hearted gestures." Her lips parted, unsure, as if she were hearing a language she no longer recognized. He took a slow step closer, gaze steady. You remind me of those sculptures I used to carve. Beautiful on the outside, perfect in form, but hollow inside. No warmth, no soul. That's what us, has become. I can't stay where there's no heart." Laura blinked, struck dumb by the truth in his words. For years, she had manipulated, diverted, and assumed he would always wait, always forgive. But here he was, whole, calm, unbroken. And she realized, perhaps too late, that the Mark she had known was gone, replaced by a man who had chosen himself first. Mark exhaled, letting go of all the anger, betrayal, and sorrow that had weighed him down for months. Turning toward Khloe, she stepped forward, her presence steady and warm, a living contrast to the cold emptiness he had left behind. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had always been meant to find each other. "Shall we?" he asked softly. Khloe nodded, a shy smile lighting up her face. Together, they walked under the pale glow of the moon, leaving behind the echoes of the past, the shattered illusions, and the heartbreak that had once consumed him. Each step felt lighter than the last. The city around them shimmered faintly in the night, a world full of possibilities waiting to be explored. There was no rush, no lingering regret, just the quiet promise of new beginnings, of trust rebuilt and love rediscovered. As they paused on a small bridge overlooking the river, Mark glanced at Khloe. "Thank you," he whispered. "For being patient, for seeing me when no one else could." Chloe's eyes glistened, reflecting the moonlight. "You deserved it, Mark. And I'll never let you forget that." Hand in hand, they continued down the path, stepping into a chapter untouched by betrayal, a story written with authenticity, courage, and heart. And so, the past dissolved, leaving behind freedom, growth, and a love that promised not just passion, but understanding, respect, and the warmth of being truly seen. Under the silver glow of the moon, they vanished into the night, a beginning, not an ending, marked by hope and the beauty of hearts reborn.